Welcome back, guys. Today's episode, I am sharing 10 true Appalachian horror stories. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Now, let's begin. I still take the Greenbrier switchback sometimes, but not at 3 in the morning and not alone. Folks around here call it Mercy Road because it snakes down from Our Lady of Mercy and you say a little prayer at every blind turn. I knew that asphalt the way a floor nurse knows the pitch of a call light. The pitch tells you what kind of trouble waits. After 12 hours of fluorescent hum and antiseptic breath, it's a relief to feel the night sit heavy on your shoulders, a relief to trade the beeps for crickets and tire hiss. That night, I clocked out at 3:03 later than I meant to, because Mrs. Collier wanted her hair braided and I didn't have it in me to say no. My badge picture stared back from the time terminal like it didn't know me. I had coffee that tasted like the inside of a penny and half a PB&J left in my lunch. Bag. The heater blower in my old Pontiac ticked. There's a leaf down in there that I never can fish out. My hands smelled like foam soap, and even with the window cracked, my car had that hospital smell, bleach and stale breath, dry gloves, the rubber of the Robodevi pump wheels. The clock on the dash glowed 3:11 when I turned onto the access road, and I remember thinking, didn't I just look at you? It felt like a joke the night was playing. Mercy sits on a hill with its back to the mountain. You take a right, then the first hard left that drops you into the Laurel. The grade gnaws at your brakes if you're careless. I know the fat hemlock where a teenager's names are carved. I know where the pavement heaves and kicks you sideways, where the county patched winter cracks with tar snakes that squirm under your tires in July. I know the wooden cross propped in the guardrail gap that swallows fog. Driving it is muscle memory. You keep your eyes soft for deer. You keep your palms loose. You don't look down at the creek because the drop is honest. I rolled the window a thumb's width and let the night in. It smelled like wet leaves and cold iron and the last of someone's wood smoke. No moon, just that star scrape you get when the air is clean and your bones are tired. Somewhere a whip poor will was doing his call, like a broken record. The radio refused to hold a station. I thumbed past a preacher, static, a fiddle tune, more static. The heater's breath warmed my knees. I sipped copper coffee and thought about Mrs. Collier's braid, neat as a church ribbon. The road tipped me onto the first real switchback, the one after the mossy culvert. I breathed with the car. That's when I saw the taillights. 2 red beads way ahead, just high enough to be a truck, steady, not too fast. I was glad to have someone to follow. It's nice having a rabbit on that downhill. I don't tailgate, and I didn't need to. The gap between us felt set like a measure in a hymn. My dash still said 3:11. I told myself the clock's wrong and set my elbow on the windowsill, and the air licked my sleeve. Somewhere in the heater's whir, I heard a tiny chime that sounded exactly like the call light on our east wing. My fingers twitched like they always do. It's nothing, I said, just in your ears. I rolled my shoulders and let the red beads lead me into the next turn. The thing about driving a road 100 times is your body knows it before your eyes do. There's a low right, a long left, a straight shot past a mailbox shaped like a trout. I waited for the trout and got the long left again. I told myself my brain was a half beat behind, that the maple trunks in the dark can trick you, and the road did slope left, just longer. I heard the call bell chime in the quiet, perfectly pitched, and for the first time I realized I was crying. No sob, just tears cooling on my cheeks like sweat. The easiest thing, maybe the only safe thing, would have been to pull over and let whatever this was pass me by. But there are only 2 honest turnouts on Mercy, and I couldn't make myself trust either of them. The first one came, as it always does, just past the rock face where boys paint hearts in the spring. It looked fine, the gravel pad pale in my headlights. But as I rolled toward it, the taillights ahead drifted slightly right too, like they wanted to show me how to do it, like an older sibling saying, "Watch, it's safe, see?" And I felt a pressure in my chest, under the sternum, the way you do when the code phone rings at night and you know a heart is complaining 2 floors down. I passed it without turning my signal on. The second turnout is a dirt wedge with a sycamore root exposed like a backbone, and it was there, except it wasn't. The same shape, the same shallow bite into the hill. but down the center of it someone had set sawhorses, reflective strips blinking back, and a sign with black letters that meant nothing to me. Road closed by order. No county seal. No date. Gravel. Lay clean beyond. No tire marks. I breathed out through my teeth in the heater blue heat that smelled like the hospital dryer room, that cooked linen heat. The taillights slid by the barricade without stutter, as if the sign were as thin as a shadow. I slowed almost to a crawl. The red beads slowed with me. I looked at the clock, hateful little thing. 3:11, bright and green. I glanced at my phone. It said 3:11:2. The second hand on my watch, old, not digital, ticked like a liar. I think that's when I said Mrs. Collier out loud. I don't know why I picked her name and not any of the hundreds. Maybe because of the braid. Maybe because when she fell asleep earlier, she'd woken once and grabbed my wrist and said, "Don't turn," which is a strange thing to tell somebody sitting beside your bed. I hear "don't turn" now, and it's everything. The road, the clock, the act of choosing. I said her name, and the rubber soles in the back seat took 2 quick steps, unmistakable, like someone caught unready. My hands made the decision for me. I braked until I stopped. My heart beat in my tongue. The road around me became very quiet in that way. The woods do when you shut your engine off. They hold still to listen. The taillights ahead didn't drift away. They simply hung there at the same distance as if my stop were theirs. I put on my hazard lights. The red beads pulsed too, on, off in our rhythm, and in the off moment I saw what lay between us and the drop beside it. Space that looked like it went on forever, deeper than it should. A slope that made my stomach pitch without any movement. I tried the door because doors are real, a thing you can do, and it stuck for a second like the car didn't want to let me out. When it gave, the night air came in hard and cold, a river against my shins. The hospital smell left like someone had opened a window in a psych room. Crickets took up the slack and water sang down in the cut where I couldn't see. I stood with my hazard lights clicking and looked at those red beads that weren't my business. Behind me, the gravel shoulder crunched under no one's feet. I had the good sense to put my hand flat on the roof, to feel the solid thing. I said, "I'm done," not to anyone, just to the dark that might listen. When I started the car again, the clock blinked once and rolled to 3:12 like it had just thought of it. The taillights ahead slid forward, not away exactly, but forward, then lifted as if going up an incline that didn't exist and dissolved into dark. Where they were, there was now only the fold of the mountain and the hint of cross-street sign, the cemetery fence where it belongs. The road under my tires became my road again. The trout mailbox on the right where it lives, the rumble strip gone from where it never was. I drove the rest on the careful edge between prayer and cussing, holding the wheel so light my fingers hurt with trying not to. I pulled into my driveway at 3:28 by the kitchen clock. My hands left wet marks on the steering wheel. The house smelled like the faint musk of the dog that died last year and clean laundry. I stood at the sink and drank tap water like it was medicine. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the table and watched my porch light do that slow moth pulse and listened for rubber soles that didn't come. The next day, in the thin blue of morning, I drove Mercy in daylight. Just to test myself, I said. Every curve was where it belonged. There was no old quarry cut sign. The turnouts were open, no sawhorses, and I laughed once when the sound in my throat became tight because I wanted someone to say, "You were tired, honey. You were hearing it in your head. Highway hypnosis, all that." I would have believed them if not for the mile marker. There on a road that never had them leaned a green 19, knocked crooked as if someone had set it in a hurry. I stopped. I put my fingers on the post. It was cold and it was real. Since then, if I have to work nights, I cut over to the state road and take the long way. I asked to move to day shift and told my supervisor it was for my back. In the small hours when I can't sleep, sometimes the radio will find that empty band and whisper a call light chime. And my body will gear up like there's a patient waiting for me down a hall that doesn't exist. I can explain most of it if you back me into a corner. How tired brains repeat patterns, how red reflects farther than you think, how mountain roads have a way of laughing when you say you know them. What I can't explain is the feeling that the distance between me and those taillights wasn't measured in feet. It felt like something was holding that space open for us, as if the mountain had palms and we were riding them, and if I had turned when it asked me not to, I wouldn't be here to sit at this table telling you about it. I've been running night freight long enough that the mile markers feel like a kind of prayer bead. You thumb them in your head to keep pace with what you can't see. 23, 22, 21. There's a rhythm to it that tells you if you're doing right by the grade and the clock. Clinch Mountain at night is one of those places where the dark sits on the hood with you, where your high beams find more air than rude and the reflectors blink back in little tired eyelids that seem to know too much. This was a Tuesday run, Knoxville to past Abingdon with a light load of dry food and paper goods. Easy pull, 32,000 gross. My Cascadia hummed the way I like, not a rattle out of place. The Eld had me on good time. I drink my coffee in gulps because if I sip it, I think too hard. The thermolid had that scorched metal taste I keep meaning to scrub out. Rain earlier had slicked the shoulders. The air off the vents smelled faintly of hot plastic and the lemon wipe I used on the wheel. CB on 19, as always. Chatter sparse. A driver somewhere fussing about a lane closure. A preacher selling salvation in hourly installments. The usual ghost voices you learn to let pass through. Clinch at night carries its own smell. Wet leaves, diesel, the cold metal of bridges even when you're not on one. I know the grade, I know the songs the engine sings when it's happy, the little shift in tone right around 1800 RPM when the mountain starts to answer. Oh, it was a clean night in the patchwork way late autumn gets clean. You can see farther, but there's less to see. The torn billboard on the right for a fireworks barn flashed by, the E long peeled off, so it just promised fur works, a clown holding a Roman candle with half its paint weathered to wood. I don't like clowns. I counted it without thinking. After that sign, I should see 21. Then the little pull-off where kids drink and throw bottles, then 20 at the big bend under the rock cut, and the pavement seems that thump, thump, thump under your steers like a worn-out heartbeat. The first 19 I took for granted. Northbound side, green and white, leaning just a hair from some winter plow that tapped it a couple years ago. I nodded to it like I always do. You get your markers, you get your grade, you breathe with the truck and keep your hands calm. Over on the fog line, in that smear of light where your beam falls off into black, something pale came and went. I thought it was a grocery bag. The way white plastic floats and skitters when a draft catches it, the way your mind wants to make a person out of it, because you're wired to look for persons, even where there aren't any. The cab clock ticked without me staring at it. 1:12. I had 3 hours before the Eld would chirp at me for a 30-minute break. I was making good time, engine temp steady, oil pressure a solid hum, the way a dog is solid on your knee. The mountain took me. The grades steadied out. Somewhere a semi coming the other way flashed his lights to thank me for turning mine down. I touched the little St. Christopher medal my daughter taped to the dash as a joke a few years back. Saint of travelers, she'd said, rolling her eyes. The chain clinked. The air dryer coughed and released. It was a road like any other night. I didn't notice what I didn't notice until after the second 19. If you run the same skin knee of road often enough, you know exactly where the paint is worn, where the dot got lazy with the tar snakes, where the rumble strip cuts in early. Oh, slay. I came around a bend expecting 20 in the rock cut, and there was 19 again, green as new mint. You can pass a lot of things and shrug. Markers aren't one of them. For a second, I thought maybe I'd looked at the last one wrong. Maybe it was 91. Old signs is spun around by a prank. I don't make a habit of reading backwards, but I would have sworn. I talked out loud the way I do when the nerves get to whispering. Sure. When I stood there listening, the world had a new sound hidden in it. Soft skin meeting road and a rhythm that wasn't mine. A pad, pad, pad that my brain insisted on syncing with my breath even when I tried not to. I climbed back in before my courage could get stupid. The slash on the 9 gleamed in my headlights. I pulled the brake and let the truck rock forward to the gentle catch of the gearbox. Back on the road, I rolled 20, 30, 50. The CB squealed. Brake, 1-9. The next green sign slid up out of darkness like a tooth. Mile 19 again. No slash, clean as if I'd never touched it. The torn billboard came, the clown missing its eye. The barefoot kept pace at my fog line. Heel, arch, heel. I turned the radio off. The silence was worse. There's a dumb bravery that comes after fear has wrung you out. I told myself out loud so I could hear it. If the number won't change, change something I can touch. I took the center lane line and sat my wheels on it like a tightrope. I slowed to 40 on a stretch where the world thinks you're rude at less than 60. The truck felt huge, felt real, the seat vibrating with a note that came out of the bones of the frame, the shiver in the steering wheel that's never left since a pothole outside Bristol got me last winter. The L ticked the minutes forward indifferent. My odometer added miles like beads. The numbers obeyed, the signs didn't. On my fourth pass at that clown's blind face and the factory's hiss near the cut, I tried the high beams, then the fogs, then just my markers, reaching for some combination that would make the world show me what it had hidden. Shadows changed like they should. Water gleamed where water always does. A pair of taillights way ahead rose and fell in the way. Somebody rides a hill too hard. I pushed up to catch them out of pure animal need. Follow something that isn't stuck, and maybe you won't be. As I drew over the crest, the taillights tilted away, down, up, then they either disappeared into a turn that shouldn't be where it was or turned into a reflection of my own patterns. Ha! The barefoot was beside me all the while, stepping along my life like it belonged there. At some point, the CB was back on without me turning it. The mic had spun on its cord, the button depressed a hair by the swing. "You got your ears on," the not voice said again. I swallowed hard enough for the pain to wake up my jaw. "I do," I said, which is the truth no matter what else was happening. "I hear you." My words hissed back to me as if thrown off a canyon wall. "It got your ears on." The beat of my own heart got into everything. The wiper motor, even though the windshield was dry. The tick of the hazard light in that one relay that sticks when it's cold. The thumplessness where I'd expected the pavement seams. I thought of a thing my father said once when we moved through a fog so thick the world shrank to hood length. If you can't see far, see close. If the mountain won't give you the long picture, let it give you the next 10 feet. So I watched for that. 10 feet at a time. The tiny glitter of crushed glass in the shoulder, a single black walnut sitting where a squirrel dropped it, the specific squashed shape of a possum I'd swear I'd already passed. The prints on the fog line began to look not like fresh wetness, but like permanent bruises on the paint, like they'd been walked a long time before me, and would be walked after. I held my breath by accident and counted to 6, let it out, counted to 6 again, the way I do when sleep won't come at home. The clock on the dash kept perfect human time. 1:26, 1:31, 1:47, as if real life was happening in me while the road played a loop in front of me to see what I'd do with it. When the 18 finally arrived, it did not announce itself with trumpets. It just sat there as dumb and green and human as any sign, one less than 19, exactly like the way we count would have you believe the world works. No fireworks billboard. The clown gone. There was an exit advertisement for a diner that hadn't been lit in years, the kind of ghost light you trust more. The fog line was empty. The prints became the normal scuffs that happened to paint. I didn't breathe again so much as realize I had been breathing the whole time wrong. I didn't stop. I didn't want to give the mountain the satisfaction of me stepping out and becoming part of whatever game it had been playing. I went all the way to the drop, rolled into the valley like somebody coming out of a movie into daylight. The first truck stop glow hit me hard, that orange sodium light that makes tired men look worse. My hands shook when I keyed the card at the pump. My ELD said I'd been on the grade 41 minutes. My internal clock swore it had been longer. Hours, something old, diesel stink brought me back. A kid with a baseball cap and a nose ring asked me if I had a smoke. "A quit," I said, and he nodded like he understood it was about more than cigarettes. Inside, under the hum of refrigerators and the lie of coffee that's been sitting too long, I tried to tell a driver at the next table. He wore a hat that said Bluefield and had that mountain polite you don't mistake for softness. "A 19 catches you," he said after he let me stumble through it. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't make a joke. You answer that channel, you can get stuck listening to yourself. Don't pull off by the number. If you gotta stop, stop where there ain't a number. He stirred his coffee like it mattered. "I run clinch daylight if I can help it," he added. "If not, I keep to the middle and mind my breath. Ain't nothing up there wants you. It just don't mind if you stay." Back on the road, I could have sworn the CB whispered with the radio off. just a hush, the syllable of air at the edge of words. 1-9. At home, after 2 more drops and a dawn that came up pale over the yards, I sat with my girl's lunchbox, jokes, and the dog asleep on my boot, and I thought about how we count when we're scared. We count to pull the world into a string we can hold. I don't have a story with a hard edge to it. I didn't see a face, I didn't save a person, I didn't wreck. I have a number that wouldn't move and a foot that didn't tire. I take the long way around Clinch now on nights when I have the hours to burn, and when I don't, I ride the center and keep my hands soft and my breathing honest. And when the signs tick how they're supposed to, I say thank you for every one, like each number is a thing that had to choose me back. Paint-lit grade is my section, which is to say I know where the frost heaves first and which shoulder carries the trash when the wind gets witchy. Ooh. Nights after a rain, they put me in the county truck with the beacon and send me to ride it. Look for rockfall, busted deer, a tire that's walked itself into the lane. The truck is an old F-250, amber light whining on the roof, toolbox rattling with a breaker bar flares, a saw that smells like bar oil even when it's clean. There's a brine tank strapped in the bed that sweats salt across the tailgate, and my gloves carry that sour-sweet sting of it no matter how many times I wash my hands. If you rolled my truck's carpet and wrung it out, it'd drip coffee that tastes like pennies and cigarette stubs from people I used to be. Paint lick falls off the ridge in 3 long ideas instead of 1. Guardrail runs the outer edge like a stitched scar. W-beam on posts, reflectors every so many lengths, the steel scabbed with rust where snowplows have kissed it wrong in February. The culverts under the road are corrugated pipe, big ones big enough a kid could crawl through, which I have told more than one kid not to do. In daylight, I can name them. The double barrel under the big sycamore, the long span where the creek braids itself and the culvert makes a low woo like it took up the habit of wind. At night, I count them by sound. The way water talks changes with the spill, the way the mountain breathes when the temperature drops. I don't sing, not even alone. But my grandmother did all the time, notes under her breath while she shelled beans or folded towels that felt like they'd been dried in sunshine, even in the dead of winter. The tune I grew up inside wasn't the radio kind. It was something older, that shape note rise and fall you get at brush arbor meetings, the one she'd hum when she thought nobody was listening. I haven't let myself think of it in years because remembering her house brings on all the other things I don't want to stir, the smell of lye soap, the jar of buttons, the day she went and didn't take a thing with her but her hair and its pins. It was midnight when I turned up the grade. The night had that brittle quality after rain, the leaves slick and sticking to the shoulders and the smell of cold iron coming off the culvert mouths. The beacon's amber pulse stuttered across the reflectors, a steady heartbeat that made the road ahead feel almost domestic, like a kitchen with a light on. The radio in the dash was off. It crackles when I hit the brake, and I didn't want company. I rolled easy, 30 to start, eyes looking for tire shine on the asphalt where a deer might have crossed, for rock shrapnel at the gutters. Then a sound came in under the truck noise. Not from the engine, not from the tire treads or the blower in the dash. Under it, outside of it. A length of tone that had nowhere to live except the space between the road and me. It rose as I rolled faster, fell when I let off. At first I pegged it to my head, some vain complaining behind my ear, the way you can hear your own blood when it's quiet enough. I cracked the window to be sure and the cold rushed in. The note stayed. A thin steel hum that held by itself even when I feathered the gas and let the engine float. And if you'd asked me right then if it sounded like anything I knew, I would have said no, but my hands got light on the wheel and my mouth pulled into a shape I hadn't made in a long time. And I realized I was breathing to it like I always had when my grandmother's tune found me. The guardrail on the drop side ran ahead, and the hum laid across it the way thread sits on a seam. If you grew up here, you already know steel sings, whether you want it to or not. The wind makes harps out of things you thought were just things, gate wire, porch rails, the lip of a bottle you didn't put down careful. So I told myself that's all this was as the pitch tracked my speed, 32 miles an hour, a low note that sat in my ribs. 37, hair higher, a little ache behind the eyes. 30 down again. I tapped the brake just enough to feel the truck nose in. The tone didn't jerk like an engine does. It slid smooth like a hand on a banister. I put it in neutral on a straight stretch and let the truck roll. The note followed, unhooked from the whining we all tell ourselves is what we're hearing. At the second pull-off, I eased onto the grit and let the truck settle. Beacon left on, so I wasn't pure foolish. I sat there with the window down and listened. The hum wasn't everywhere. It ran the length of rail against the drop like a string drawn tight. I got out because I'm the sort who needs to lay my hands on a thing before I'll let it tell me a story. Cold bit my knuckles through the gloves. The rail was slick with that oily mist rain leaves behind, and the amber light rolled up its ribs like a slow wave. I pressed my palm to the W-beam and felt nothing at first but the faint grain of rust. Then, so slight I thought I was imagining it, the metal under my hand shivered like a cat's skin when a fly lights. The tone came stronger. It wasn't loud. That would be easier to argue with. It was the exact kind of loud that can take up the whole field of hearing because it sits right in the pitch where your body already is. I slid my palm along the steel, and the note bent with me. The posts, spaced regular, gave it a heartbeat. Slow, faster, slower, slower. I didn't push hard enough to make it myself. I know the difference between a vibration I cause and one that was waiting for me to notice. A culvert mouth yawned black, and from inside came a breath. That's the word. It had the shape of breath. Oh, the pipe takes the night in when the wind pushes and lets it go, when the wind passes, and the mountains turn that exchange into something with meaning. My grandmother's tune grew in the line of steel, not the notes themselves, not a melody your head could hum without help, but the cadence of it, the way it rises like a question and falls like you've answered as well as you can. The culvert answered it 2 beats behind in a low, round sound, not a harmony so much as a second thought spoken soft. I stood between them and felt like a boy again, sitting on carpet that smelled like baking and hearing her hum while she mended something that had given way. "Acquit it," I said to the rails, which is not the thing you're supposed to tell a whole mountain edge. My voice didn't sound like mine out there. It fell flat at my boots and went into the ditch and didn't come back. The beacon made the bolts blink bright, dim, bright, and in the blink, the hum took on a pulse that made my chest hurt, like someone gently pressing a palm there and letting up, pressing again. I took my wrench out and touched the socket to the steel just to see if I could change the truth of it. The note slid down like I was damping a guitar string. Let go, and it came back to the pitch it wanted. 35 miles an hour if I had to name it, the exact speed a cautious person holds on wet pavement when they don't want to ride the brake. I stepped away and it settled into itself. I followed the sound down to the culvert and squatted at the lip. A water hissed through the corrugations, picking up a broken branch now and then and wrapping it along the rings like a hand tapped on a washboard. When the wind moved, it made that long syllable pipes always do, a vowel without a tongue to shape it. The rail spoke. The pipe answered. Call and answer like church, but no person was doing the calling. The words were the part my brain tried to invent because we make words out of anything. I kept hearing the tail of a phrase that wasn't any phrase. Mind the. The rest of it never came. Maybe it said line, maybe light, maybe none of that. Maybe it wasn't for me at all. I tell you the honesty of it, I cried. Not the handsome kind. Eyes shining, jaw set. The kind that comes when something hits a chord in you that's been tuned a long time and you didn't know it. My hand shook stupid. Oh, the air moved down the pipe and came back out, and my breath picked it up without consulting me. I backed away because I am not the man who sticks his head in a pipe to see if the mountain will kiss him on the mouth. I set out one of my triangles even though no one else was on the grade, because rituals matter when you are being ridiculous and scared at the same time. Back in the truck, I cut the beacon and the hum dimmed as if the light had been feeding its nerve. Engine on, window still cracked. I eased out to the lane and let the truck roll. 35, there. The tone caught me like a hand on the back of my coat. 31, it let me go a little. The culvert voice kept up the whole way like it would, like water does, like wind. Oh. The hum ran the rail clear to where the long curve eases up. At the top of the grade, it folded into silence without drama, like someone decided the verse was over. I put it in the log, the way you put a dream in your work notebook so you can prove the world still has edges. A guardrail resonance paint lick MP 6.1 to 6.7. Consider adding dampers. It looks sensible when you write it like that. There are rubber pads you can tuck between beam and block. There are brackets that take the wiggle out. We've done it on a corner where the wind turned the cables into a banjo. I went back daylight with Shauna from the crew to show her. Nothing. Band of white where road dust doesn't settle, same as any rail. Water in the pipe ticking, not talking. The mountain looked dumb in that honest way things do when the sun is out. No mystery, just distance and gravity. We tightened a splice plate because it was the right thing to do, and because doing something keeps your mouth shut when you don't want to tell a person what you thought you heard. That night, on my second run, it took less time to find it. Part of that was the weather, same kind of breath in the air, same temperature drop. Part of it was me. Your body learns the pitch of trouble and the pitch of home the same way. I rolled with no radio, no beacon, the windows down 2 inches. It was there, waiting where it had been, like a dog that has picked a spot in the yard to dig. I rode the center line to see if it would leave me if I denied it the edge. It didn't. The tone still lived to my right, steady. I slowed at the third culvert on a feeling. Maybe I wanted a sign that I had any say in the conversation. A rock lay 2 curves ahead, not a boulder, not a widowmaker, just the kind that catches a low car and makes a bad night. I set it in the ditch, breath moving like the pipe's breath while I bent over. That's nothing. Though, that's nothing you couldn't expect on any grade after any rain. If the rail told me to slow and the mountain showed me a rock, it did it in a language that would sound silly if I tried to translate it. Here is what changed. Before paint licks started singing at me, I would come home and peel out of clothes that smelled like brine and grease and lay in front of the TV until sleep took me mean. Now some nights I park at the bottom of the grade and let the truck click as it cools, and I sit with my hands on my knees and listen to nothing on purpose. I go to church with the kids on the Sundays it's my turn, and when the congregation rises to sing, I stay seated and I put my fingers on the pew where the wood is worn satin smooth by 100 years of somebody else's hand. The first notes of that old tune will come floating off people who sang it 50 years longer than I've been alive. And there's a place in my chest that won't be quiet for a while after. I think of my grandmother's mouth, the way it moved, and the way she never needed the words to make the melody mean. Shauna asked me last week if I'd get the dampers ordered. I told her yes. I have the catalog dog-eared to the right page. I keep not making the call. It's not that I want the grade to sing. It's not that I'm afraid to quiet it. It's that I don't quite trust that rubber would do anything if the mountain had the notion to talk. I've seen chains on a gate tremble in air that wasn't moving. I've watched fog lie in a holler like the valley was holding its breath while somebody made a choice. Maybe it's wind and pitch and the way we carry our dead in the pocket right behind the sternum, so anything in that key will set them ringing. Maybe it's nothing at all. What I know is this. If you run paint lick at 2 in the morning in a truck with more tools than sense, and the guardrail puts a thin hum in your bones that you haven't heard since a room you haven't been in for a long time, don't be cocky. Let your hands go soft. Ride the middle if you can. If the culvert breathes, breathe with it. Don't stand in the mouth of the pipe and ask it to use words. You won't like what you think you hear, and it won't be for you anyway. If you need a reason for what happened, write a resonance in your log and go on. Me, I say good evening when I top the grade and good night when I get to the bottom. And sometimes, when it's quiet enough, the rail carries the last note out for me like the mountain has a habit of finishing what I start. Around here, people talk about Panther Gap Tunnel like it's a mouth the mountain forgot to close. It's not on any tourist map. It's an old railroad bore they turned into a service road for the power company. Rails pulled, ties long gone, a stripe of asphalt thrown through years ago and then left to fend for itself. In daylight, you can see daylight through it, a keyhole cut straight through the ridge. At night, it's just a black that has weight to it like wet felt. The dare is dumb and simple. Roll the windows down, cut your headlights for 3 seconds in the center coast, count out loud. Somebody's older brother swears he saw the tunnel fog itself like breath and lift his hair. Somebody else swears you can hear a train in there if you hold still. People swear all kinds of things when there's nothing to lose and everything to prove. Like, Jesse and I were the kind of cousins who came up more like brothers. Our moms working second shift at the nursing home, us left to a grandmother who believed boredom was a sin. We mowed the same yards, stole the same gas from the red can no one marked, rolled the same truck tires down the same hill behind the school. When we were 17 and 19, we had a '94 Ranger between us that smelled like wet carpet and stale Marlboro. You had to tap the dash to make the speedometer wake up. The passenger door stuck if you didn't lift as you pulled. The bench seat had a spring that poked your hip just left of the bone. I can still feel it if I sit just so. It was August. Heat snapped off at last by a thunderstorm that left the road shining in patches and the air cool and nervous. Locust blossoms gone already, but they're ghost-sweetened things anyway. You could smell creosote if you knew to sniff for it, that tar candy stink that gets in the knuckles and never leaves. Someone had told us you should only try the tunnel after a rain. That's when she's breathing. Said like the way you say a river's good for fishing after a cold snap. I don't know why we listened to Tyler Blevins, who lied about everything including the way his own last name was pronounced, but we did. Boys don't need reasons when something feels like a dare that might change nothing and everything. We took the switchbacks up to the gap with the windows half down and the radio refusing to settle on anything but static and oldies from Bristol. The Ranger's fan belt squealed in a way that said it was new and tight and would settle down when it stretched. My shirt stuck between my shoulder blades, then cooled as the truck pulled shadow. The tunnel showed up the way tunnels do. One moment it's rock face and green, the next it's a perfect circle of absence ahead, a black coin in the trees. The mouth had a lip spalled from freeze-thaw, concrete chunked away to show aggregate like gray teeth. There's a yellow diamond sign somebody gave up on ray painting. Single lane, tilted and shot through twice. Graffiti stacked old over older on the wing walls. Hearts, boys' names, a spray of a cat's head with fangs, and somebody's a karma is real in pink bubble letters bleeding down with the rain. Jesse put his hand at 12 o'clock and slowed. "You ready?" he said, and I laughed because the idea of being ready for a mountain to have lungs is ridiculous. We'd done Starnes Hollow at night. We'd jumped the creek by the old quarry. We'd watched Tyler fail at both and brag about it anyway. This felt like less, and that was the trap. It felt like nothing at all. The tunnel did what tunnels always do. They take the world and make it one idea. Everything outside of the mouth quieted itself to let us lean into the dark. I could smell the shift when we hit shadow. Limestone wet, a cold iron smell like rebar sweating. A memory of creosote, the way old wood, holds on to its own history. Drips mark time somewhere high above, not a leak so much as a patient metronome you can only hear when you breathe in. 3 seconds, Jesse said more to himself than me, because even a dumder has to be measured if you're the one driving. We rolled with our hands open over our knees the way boys do when they need to look like they're not bracing for anything at all. We agreed to the rules without saying them. Windows down, lights off for 3, count steady and honest, no touching the brake. In the middle is where people do it, between the two daylights, because that's where the dark is thickest, where the tunnel forgets there's an ending and a beginning and tells you about the middle instead. We coasted in. The Ranger's headlamps threw yellow against wet concrete ribs, caught the chalk white of old mineral streaks like bones. Swallow nests knitted into the curve up near the crown like they were part of the engineering. Our tires clicked over something now and then, a missing chunk of asphalt, a rock that had made its way from wall to roadway. Halfway in, the world became only the tunnel. It always does, but that night the punched-out circle of starlight behind us felt further than 50 yards. And the one ahead might as well have been a coin held up by somebody you don't trust. The radio picked up a station without words, just a carrier wave and a hiss like wind through cottonwood leaves. Jesse took his foot off the gas and let the Ranger's weight carry. "You count," he said. I licked my lips and tasted something metallic, like the water in the school fountain that ran too long. "1," I said, and flipped the lights with my thumb. Dark isn't one thing in there, it's layers. There's the dark behind your eyes when you blink. There's the dark your brain makes to fill the space where light should be. Then there's the dark that sits on your cheeks and wrists like a hand, like it has temperature. The second the headlights died, the air moved. I felt it like you feel a door open in a house you thought was sealed. Hair lifting on forearms, shirt puckering against my chest. It came out of the tunnel in a clean push, not gusty, not erratic. a steady exhale that put the smell of stone and damp into our mouths. It carried under the truck and lifted the wrappers in the cup holder, tugged the ash Jesse had flicked earlier into a ribbon that drifted toward the windshield and curled in a way that wanted to go back where it had come from. "Sue," I said, but the word broke because the air had already reversed. The inhale was gentler. It pulled up the hair at my temple and then thought better of it, drawing along my jaw and into the truck through the open windows, filling the cab, filling us as we counted. My body wanted to match it, to take that breath and give it back, to be part of the tunnel's timing. I didn't do it on purpose. I did it because that's how bodies are. Someone breathes near you and you find yourself moving to their rhythm. Jesse's fingers lifted a little off the wheel, a reflex to pressure. The Ranger drifted half an inch to the right and then corrected itself like a good dog. "A 3, I said, and tossed the lights back on, and in that instant between off and on my eyes found what they could. The darkness wasn't perfectly black. It had a body. It had a soft shine in it, the way you can see your breath in the cold if the porch light hits it just so. The whole length ahead of us hummed with a movement, not sound, a suggestion of vapor that went out when we breathed out and came in when we breathed in. Except we weren't breathing out and in yet. We were still at 3. We had not yet thought of taking a breath. With the lights back, it should have been over, the little joke over the big trick. The Ranger's beam should have flattened everything. They didn't. The exhale came again with the lights on, nothing to do with headlamps. It moved the dangling threads of a lost hoodie tied around a rebar stub in the wall. It lifted the edge of the Black Flag concert poster someone had half glued down a week ago and hadn't come back for. It made the water on the floor crease itself and spread like a skirt. And more than anything, it made a voice out of air without words. A pulse you could feel through your teeth, the way a bass line gets in your fillings. "A stack effect," I said, "because you say things you've heard grown-ups say when you're scared. Warm air rises, cold air falls, pressure equalizes. It's just the difference between..." The inhale came like it was listening to be contradicted. It pulled the word back into my mouth in a way that made me swallow the end of it. Jesse laughed, but it didn't come out right. It came out thin. "It's breathing," he said, soft like he was trying out the truth of it before he let it go. We rolled slow. The breath matched us. When we sped up 3 miles an hour, the tunnel's inhale came quicker and its exhale went longer, like a runner who'd set a new pace. When we slowed, it slowed too. The radio found a man talking somewhere, a voice older than any preacher I've listened to, the syllables long sanded into murmurs. Jesse tapped the face of it and the voice went away and the hiss stayed. The hair on my arms lay down when the breath did, lifted when it did, like I was a field of grain under somebody's weather. Near the center, the dark was thickest, and it wasn't a metaphor. The headlights hit it and dimmed a little in the way lights do when fog is real, except there was no visible cloud, only a density you felt in your sinuses, a kind of soft weight on the face. Somewhere ahead, a drip timing itself to its own patience changed. The tempo altered without our permission, and the exhale came long and steady enough that for one stupid heartbeat I thought, "Don't breathe yet. Wait your turn." That feeling, the invitation or the order, I don't know which, made my tongue stick to my teeth and my scalp tighten like somebody had put hands there. I took a breath anyway, because not breathing is a good way to make yourself understand you're an animal and not a story. We came out the far side like the truck had been spit. We didn't punch the gas, didn't shout, didn't whoop, didn't slap the dash like victory. We were quiet in the way things are quiet after a long coughing fit. The world too bright, too sharp, the stars all needle pricks instead of chalk. The night on the other side tasted different. The breeze in the trees had its own honest rustle, and it made me feel stupid for borrowing breath from stone. My eyes took a second to love the greens again, the wet leaves glittering under the Ranger's lights like scales. The dash clock said we'd been in the tunnel for 1 minute, maybe 2. My chest said longer. The smell in the cab changed slow, creosote pulled back to the corners, limestone settled in the seat fabric where it would climb up on the next person to sit. My shirt clung like I'd run. Not. Jesse tapped the steering wheel twice with the heel of his hand the way he does when he's trying to decide if he's mad. "Ah, stack effect," he said, mocking me, and I nodded. It was a good word to put on something we couldn't hold on to without it. We pulled off in a gravel pocket under the power lines. The crickets there made their dry violin sound and the line hissed above us like fat in a skillet. I stepped out into grass wet enough to soak my socks. The world felt a half-inch too far away, like my arms would have to be longer to touch it. I leaned my head against the ranger's warm hood because warmth is a fact you can test. Jesse lit a cigarette he swore he was quitting. When he breathed out, the smoke hung flat between us for a long beat and then tugged toward the tunnel mouth 30 yards behind like it remembered where it used to belong. He pinched the cigarette dead and said, "A nope to nothing and nobody." We went back in daylight because we are fools with jobs and we like telling ourselves we check things. The tunnel in sun was just a piece of the mountain taken out and not put back. The air inside was cooler, sure. The engineering books would back me up. A breeze came through steady enough to make a leaf travel the whole way end to end if you said it right. The swallow nests were brown and ugly in their worth. A few worried parents chittered at us for standing under their house. The chalk bones on the walls were just water being water. A breathing, Jesse said. And then, the way a man says grace when he's not sure he believes in much anymore, he added, okay? What stuck wasn't a story to tell to scare anybody. It was the way my chest learned in there a rhythm that wasn't mine and then had to unlearn it. For weeks, if I fell asleep on my back, I'd wake with the feeling that the house had shifted its weight and inhaled, and my breath had matched it. And I was late to my own exhale. In the grocery store, if the freezer fans cut on all at once, I'd feel that lift at my temples and want to cut the lights off to see if it made sense again. I started cracking my bedroom window even in January, like I could keep something honest with air that came and went on its terms instead of the heat pumps. Jesse started carrying an inhaler he didn't need. He said it was for allergies, and then he stopped saying anything at all about it. He went once by himself, he told me later, when his girlfriend wanted to see if the tunnel would do it for her. He told her the rules. He said they didn't cut the lights that time. He couldn't make himself. The girlfriend laughed and counted anyway and turned them off herself. And Jesse said the breath didn't change a thing. Still came, still went. But it felt wrong in a new way, like talking over somebody who isn't done. He drove through without saying three or stack effect or anything else, and then didn't take her back. I've got all the explanations ready, depending on who asks. I can talk about pressure differentials, about thermal mass, about the way a valley pulls air like a straw at night and pushes it out in afternoon. I can talk about our brains being social enough that we will sync our bodies to the pacing of anything that feels like a body. A pendulum clock, a refrigerator cycling, a person asleep in the same bed. Most days that's enough. I make the world in front of me line up with the world I need to walk through. But every once in a while, in the hour where the ridge silhouette cuts the last light into pieces, I'll see a white fog pull toward the gap from the creek bottom, low and patient. Not ground fog, but something with intention. It will pour up through the trees and notch itself thin to go through the tunnel like it has somewhere to be on the other side. Like the mountain is returning what it borrowed or borrowing what it needs. If you go, don't be stupid. Or be stupid in the respectful way. Roll your windows down. Don't shout. Don't hold your breath to get through the middle faster. Let the breath finish. If you count, count honest and out loud, and don't argue with your own voice when it staggers. If you name it a stack effect, say it like a prayer instead of a punchline. I can't tell you it's anything more than wind and temperature. I can only tell you I've never matched my breathing to a thing I couldn't see and felt more seen by it, and I don't want to do it again. And sometimes when the heat kicks on at night, and the vents, my body does it anyway, adjusting by reflex to a mouth in the dark I know isn't there. We call that hairpin devil's elbow because the road comes back on itself so hard you feel like you're driving into your own rear bumper. It's a tight bend cut into shale, timber crowding the outside shoulder, the river shouldering along 30 feet down, and not enough guardrail where there ought to be the most. I work nights in a county where people think a detour sign is a suggestion, and I know the elbow too well. Who slid there in a frost? Who's tapped the rail and lied about it? Who left a cross wedged in the rock because a cousin never came back? Storm rolled through at supper time, just enough to make the world smell like wet leaves and mud that remembers floods. Most of it was north of us, lightning like camera flashes in the hills, and by the time dispatch sent me up to set a detour for a washed-out bridge 2 miles past the elbow, the air was clean cold, the kind that lives in your teeth. My Explorer carried that mixed perfume of every cruiser, stale coffee, spilled pepper spray you can't ever get out, the ghost of old cigarettes the last guy swore he never smoked. I had cones, flares, a saw with a temperamental choke, a stop-slow paddle with tape peeling off the edge. Amber bar on the roof whining like a beehive. I was alone. It's a 2-person job if you ask the manual, but manuals aren't written for counties that can't keep more than 2 deputies on at night. I hit the elbow at 037 by my dash, put my hazards on, walked the inside lane with my light and the careful step you learn when the shoulder has the appetite of a cliff. The river below talked in that way you only hear at night, lazy in spots, quick where a buried boulder breaks it, a cold drag on your ears. A sycamore had gone down around the bend beyond my sight line. Dispatch had that from a call, a woman who said she heard it go like thunder. But where I stood, it was just wet asphalt with a smear of leaves and acorns and the small hail of shrapnel from the storm. No traffic yet. The bridge closure hadn't stacked people up. I set my cones back from the point where sight ends, calibrated for the driver going too fast to admit it, and lit 2 flares. Road flares smell like struck matches in school chemistry class, that sulfur chalk that sits in your sinuses whether you breathe it on purpose or not. Their red light made shadows jump that wouldn't have in daylight. I thumbed my mic. Dispatch, 112, 1023 at Devil's Elbow. Setting detour. I'll check on that tree. Static then. A copy, 112. Be advised possible partial block beyond the bend. Watch your 6. I was 5 steps from the curve's blind when the light showed. Not mine. Not the flat lead white you get from a mag light. Not the sharp blue of a cell phone light. This was warm yellow and round, the kind that leaves a halo without a core, and it moved. It swung left, right, a steady beat like someone walking with their wrist loose on a lantern handle. The air shifted a little, brought a smell I hadn't realized I knew until it was in my throat. Old oil, kerosene with dust in it, iron, and something faint like singed wick. I told myself it was the utility crew. Line guys sometimes carry their own lights even with headlamps, but they don't. They bring light that bolts to the world and howls. They don't bring little circles on hooks that move like living wrists. Headlights came down the grade. Somebody with more speed than the sign would like, and that warm light stepped into the lane in front of them 10 yards ahead of my cone. Low, like a person on the shoulder. It went up once 2 beats as if raising arm and then back down, and the car's nose dipped obediently. The light swung toward the pull-off pocket on the inside where the county's dirt fills the gap and people toss their beer cans, then swung back, a clear little invitation. This way, not that. I raised my paddle out of habit and my other hand out of, I don't know what, a half wave like you do when someone's already doing your job. The lantern did that little raise and dip again at the car, and the driver read it exactly, easing into the pocket where he couldn't see the drop anymore, and trusting that that was fine. "Well, thanks," the driver called, and I almost said "you're welcome" before I remembered he wasn't talking to me. When I got close enough to step into the circle of yellow, the air in it changed temperature, noticeably, like it had its own weather. A moth spiraled out of nowhere to slap itself against nothing and then hang stupid in space like a piece of confetti before it fell. The flame, if that's what it was, wasn't a flame you can point at. No filament, no mantle, no wick visible, no smear of glass. Just a warm, heart-colored pulse that made my pupils tight. There's a thing in your body that stands when you're near a cliff. Little muscles along the back that lift hair and make you feel taller, and being taller is a lie that gives you a second to think. Mine all stood. I put a toe out to the edge to see how much faith the mountain was asking for. The asphalt under that toe gave. Not the dramatic break of a stuntman's prop, just a soft collapse like a pastry you pushed too hard. My heel yelled up my bone. The light held steady, just beyond where a man could stand if he were a man. Then it leaned, the way a person leans when he's trying to look you in the eye to say something without scaring you. I thought for no good reason of an old photograph in the station from the 50s, road crew in caps and coveralls, one man with a lantern in his hand at dusk while the others stare into the lens, Hard because they don't smile for a thing that's stealing them. Knock it off, I said without meaning to the light, to the river, to the part of me that leaned when it leaned, when it leaned. You made your point. The radio on my shoulder crackled as if it too had something to add. 112, do you need assistance? Dispatch again, but the voice pushed across my skin like a draft. My mouth was dry enough to make my answer click. Negative, I said. And then, because superstition is just another word for being polite to the dark, I added, thank you. That's when the lantern moved like a head nods once, twice, and then slid past me toward the car, keeping a nice, careful distance from the places a person would die. It swung toward the safe pocket, as if dismissing a student who'd finally done the correct math. The driver went a little wave out the window like you do for a man in a reflective vest. Taillights disappeared down the grade. The light paused, then drew back toward the bad spot, hovered so I could watch it, then sank, not fell, lower rootward until the yellow drowned in shadow that wasn't all river and was gone. Only the smell hung for a breath too long. The dark at the edge filled itself back in with the kind of silence that isn't absence but appetite. The saw crew from Highways got there 20 minutes after I asked for them. 2 trucks that smell like chain oil and coffee. You can hear them before you see them, the rattle of the chipper, the particular crunch of gravel under duals. They brought floodlights so white they make the world look like a doctor's office. Soon as those came on, the elbow turned practical. Sycamore across both lanes around the bend like a drop length of bone, branches slick with rain, bark pale and skinned where it met the road. The men moved like the practiced get small-minded. Eyes on bar, on tooth, on bind. They sawed, they shoved, they cussed because the wedge wasn't quite behaving. I put on a vest and took the far side to slow cars and tell them they'd be okay. Nobody asked who'd been flagging them into the pocket while it was just me. Nobody asked because most of them assumed it had been me the whole time. Between stacks of cars, I walked to the place where the shoulder had pretended to be shoulder and wasn't. In the floodlight, it looked like an innocent dark patch until you crouched. Then it was a mouth. The high water had gnawed the dirt out from under the asphalt and left it a crust, no thicker than my knuckles. My boot print sat an inch from the brake like evidence in a trial. I shined my flashlight past it and found the river hitching foam against 2 big rocks and what might have been a ladder of roots from something that died long ago. I stuck my arm out past where a person ought to and felt cold climb my sleeve like it had a right. I did not feel like a man who had saved anyone. I felt like someone had saved me because they were tired of counting crosses. I took a breath and tasted coal oil, even with chainsaw exhaust in my nose. One of the crew, kid named Harlan, took a break and wandered up. "You smell that? That?" he said, face wrinkled like he'd gotten a whiff of his granddad's barn. He tapped his nostril with a gloved finger. "Old lamp. I ain't smelled it since I was little." He flicked his head in the direction of the bend. You got a lantern in your kit?" "No," I said too fast. "Just flares." He nodded. Like that fit a world he understood, and went back to a saw that wouldn't idle without a hand on the trigger. Harlan's father and my uncle had laid pipe together once. Folks' names echo here. You can't drop a stone without hitting somebody who knew your people. Ace. By 2, the sycamore was in chunks and the elbow was a road again, wet and clean and briefly younger from the scrape. I pulled cones and kicked the spent flares to the ditch with my boot. The smell lingered the way a word you don't use anymore does when someone else says it. I walked down to the little gravel pocket inside the bend, the one the light had herded people into, and I crouched because standing felt wrong. The stones there were nothing. Rounded creek rock, a green bottle half buried, a Copenhagen lid flat with rain. In the middle, where my light fell, was a black bubble the size of a dime like soot where something burned close to the ground. I reached with 2 fingers like a child at a candle, touched the damp asphalt, and came away with a faint smear. My glove smelled old and foreign when I lifted it to my face, cheap hat oil and the sweet of a wick that's been pinched. Back at the office, I told the report in a way that won't get you pulled off nights. Tree down, conducted traffic, no injury, potential undercut at mile marker, whatever our county never uses. Notify Highways for guardrail installation. It reads practical. It's not a lie, not all of it. My sergeant read it with his mouth making that offer of a grin that he doesn't spend unless he has to. You get anybody turn around on you up there? He asked, and I heard the small hook in the question. I shook my head. Oh, gay-minded, I said, which was true. A week later, the highways put up a run of rail where the shoulder had eaten itself and posted a fresh advisory sign with chevrons that in daylight looked like a row of arrows telling a drunk which way home is. People still slide there. Fog still stacks the bend like sheets drying on a line. I still get sent. Now when I go, I sit in my cruiser a minute after I park and I take the keys out of the ignition and I put them on the dash on purpose and I say, not pray, just say like you do when you talk to a dog through a screen door, I'm here, I'll watch, you can rest. If the idea of talking to what isn't there bothers you, you've never stood beside a river at 1 in the morning and listened to trees say things in a language your body recognizes, even if your brain won't. On clear nights driving past, sometimes a flick will live in the corner of my eye where the bad spot used to be. I have not checked it. I have not chased it. I've learned, finally, that gratitude and curiosity are cousins and you invite one, and the other shows up with a crowbar. I keep the window closed there no matter the heat because smell is a trickster, and if kerosene wanted to live in my head, I'd rather not give it the front door. When strangers from out of county blow the curve and whip into the pocket all on their own, I wave with my paddle, and I take their thanks like it's mine, because there's no line on the incident report for dividing up the work between one man and whatever else is issued a job on that bend. I can explain it in pieces to people who need it explained. The way eyes turn warm points of light into intentions. The way a brain trained to read hand signals will read any swing-like instruction. The way scent can be memory more than air. The way a night after rain will make sound travel strange and throw what's near into where you think far is. All that fits in a mouth. What doesn't is the feeling that the elbow has a watcher that knows both sides of mercy, the kind that pulls cars safe and the kind that draws the person with the flashlight a little too close to the lip to see if he remembers what lives under him. I remember the weight of my boot on pavement that didn't want me and the sound of stones going down to tell on me and a light pausing long enough to ask if I'd learned. I say yes, though I don't know what I learned exactly, and I keep to the inside line, and I don't say thank you out loud because maybe that's the other thing it's after. The parkway at night shrinks to 2 lanes, a ribbon of gray that feels like it's laying itself down just ahead of your bumper, and those odd little blue domes that mark the old emergency call boxes. We don't tell visitors to rely on them anymore. Half are decommissioned, copper cut, aligned dead stickers baked to the faceplate. Folks carry cell phones that don't work on ridges, find out the hard way about the difference between bars and hope. My job is gates and bathrooms and drunks asleep under quilts at overlooks, plus 1,000 small kindnesses you don't put in the log. Fixing a jammed vending door, a jump start for a family that miscounted their battery. Most nights it's air through a cracked window, the smell of pine pitch and wet shoulder mud, and a radio that mutters the names of places like a Rosary, Cold Spring, Laurel Knob, Browning's View. The truck's an old Ford with brush guards and a temperamental spotlight. The cabin smells like spilled coffee and the rubbery ghost of the raincoat I keep wadded behind the seat. My uniform keeps its own scent. Sunburn, a nylon, dust, a faint iodine tang from the first aid kit that leaks even when it's closed. I run my section from milepost 327 to 342, give or take. I could drive it with my eyes soft and my hands loose past overlooks I know by the shape of their trees. The blue domes on the call boxes were swapped to lead 5 years ago. They don't spin like the old ones did. They just glow that calm aquariums for birds blue. It was August, heat broken by far thunder and a storm that never quite found us. The fog ran in veils, low to the grass, then lifting to the knee, then hanging in threads across the roadway like web. My dash clock read 1:08. The radio coughed out another district's traffic and fell quiet. Every small sound got large in the absence. My turn signal, the soft tick of the dash mount, the fan's tired whine. I just passed Beach Lick Overlook when I heard it. Not the radio, not the truck, not a frog or the metallic chitter cicadas get into when heat hangs on. A ring. A telephone ring from 60 feet off the pavement from the box with the blue dome at the end of the stone walk. Not an electronic chirp, not a synthesized tone. The old, mechanical double burr of a bell. Bring, bring. Pause. Bring, bring. It rolled down the slope like sound does when it can't find anything to stick to. I told myself without thinking, it's a utility test. Telco sends voltage down the ghost of a line every now and then to see what answers the way you shout into a hollow place to find out if it's empty. I flipped on my hazards out of habit, lifted the radio to my mouth, and said the sort of thing you say so you feel real. A 326 to dispatch. I'm 10-6 at Beach Lick for a call box check. The mic was warm from my hand. The radio popped and then went flat like it had remembered it was only a radio and not a person. The path to the box is a short one. They all are. Somebody decided distress shouldn't have to walk far, and it's edged in those stones that never sit quite perfect. The ones you have to watch or you'll turn an ankle. The blue dome glowed steady over the box at the end, turning the fog cobalt. In that light, the faceplate metal looked like skin under aquarium glass. The push for help button wore a thumb shine. Somebody had taped the sticker crooked so a line dead leaned like it was drunk. It rang again as I approached. The sound didn't fit in the air right. It felt too big for the place, like a laugh in a church basement. The wind was down. The leaves didn't have an opinion. Somewhere a creek talked to itself under rocks the way water does when it's having a private argument. The ring rolled over all of it in bright, polite bursts like someone on the other end was waiting for me to pick up and would keep being patient until I did. I know better than to rush anything on a ridge. You keep your feet honest and your mouth closed, unless you can't help it. Still, I went quicker than I mean to admit. The way you go when a thing you thought was dead insists on being alive. The handset sat in its cradle, black plastic scuffed white where hands worry things. No cord, I still remember thinking. That's how you know you're not thinking. Of course there was a cord. The world was correct. The sticker was the lie. It rang again, 2 bells in a metal throat. And I put my hand on the handset before I had all my good reasons lined up. The plastic was colder than it had any right to be in August. Cold like a tool left on a concrete floor. It stuck my skin a little. The ring cut off the instant my fingers tightened, and the silence after it was deep enough to make me hear my own swallow. The box had a smell faint under the cold dust that's turned to grease, spiderweb that's eaten summertime, a ghost of ozone like what you get when a copy machine lies about knowing what it's doing. I lifted the handset to my ear and braced for nothing. A deadline isn't quiet the way you think. It's a sort of cottony absence that makes your brain start inventing sound to fill the void. I waited for that. Instead, I got a breath, faint and closed, not the tunnel kind, not wind, the human kind. Then a voice laid itself flat across the open end of the line, not male, not female, not from anywhere I could name, the way a voice sounds when you record it and forget that it's yours. A ranger, it said, like it had already been speaking to me for some time, and I'd finally joined the conversation. Oh, you don't want the little turnout past Cold Spring tonight? I didn't speak. The truth is I couldn't. I knew the map in my glove box and the one in my head. There is no little turnout past Cold Spring, just a maintenance gate and 2 tire ruts that go into brush where we stash rocking cones. Where we stash rocking cones. People don't park there because they don't know it exists. You don't want that one, the voice said again, patient as if it could feel me looking at the picture in my brain. I'll keep left. Take the long bend. Don't stop when you think you need to. The words lay flat, like it wasn't trying to convince me or scare me. Just lay them down like boards across a wet place. Who is this? I managed, because that's the line you say. The handset creaked from my grip. The blue dome hummed above me, a little insect in its zlezied. The voice made a sound that might have been a smile if a smile could make a sound. You already know, it said, and I felt a small, sick tilt in my stomach I didn't enjoy. Say it back, it added, and for a second my tongue remembered the words before my head did. If it isn't on your map, I heard myself say, because my mouth took the leash from whatever part of me was still interested in dignity. It isn't for you. I hadn't said that before, not once. I hadn't even thought it as a sentence you could live inside. The minute the last word left, The handset went quiet in the clean way a line goes quiet when the other person has hung up and the wire goes back to its job of being just wire. I put the phone back in the cradle and pressed the hook switch like I could make the world explain itself. Nothing. I lifted it again and got what I'd come expecting the first time. The dumb, cotton candy silence of a dead circuit. I stared at the sticker until a line deadie stopped looking like English and became a shape. A spider I hadn't noticed, a mean-legged little bronze one that likes corners, did a tiny vibration on its web and then held still again. I could hear my own heartbeat in the bowl of the blue light. I went back to the truck because I am not the person who stands at a thing they can't argue with and tries to argue anyway. I drove slow. The fog had lifted higher, hugging the level of the hood, thinning where the road fell away to the right as if the valley had taken a breath. I passed Cold Spring Overlook, sign white as a tooth in my headlights. 100 yards beyond, on the right where the grass always sits a little lower, a scrap of gravel showed wheel marks I had not seen there before. In the sweep of light, it looked like any utility pull-off, 2 tire ruts and an old metal gate with paint cooked off. But the air had that too clean look it gets after something has been moved that hasn't in a long time. The wheel in my hands tried a thought on just a small, unconscious tip toward the right you do when a dark place looks like it might be a shortcut. The phrase I'd just spoken, my phrase, not my phrase, came up my throat like a cough. If it isn't on your map, it isn't for you. I kept left. The road rose into a long, patient bend I've always liked. In the mirror, I saw nothing but the tail end of my own red lights and the faint hint of something like a wash of fog crossing low where the turnout would have been. I kept my speed honest. I listened. Somewhere down the slope, a sound went the way a rock goes when it has been dislodged by something heavier than deer. A whole sound with a beginning and an end. Then the night resumed her chores. Crickets, one barred owl swallowing his own question. 5 minutes later, another blue dome rang. I heard it before I saw it. Same old-fashioned ring double bell. This time the box was across a little stone bridge at Browning's View. I didn't stop. I don't know if that makes me a coward or just someone who learns. I rolled with the windows down and let the sound slide along my shoulder like a hand that has the right to touch you and doesn't take advantage. When I passed the box, the ring stopped mid-brrr and started again after I'd gone by like it was trying to catch my timing and not quite could. In the morning, I wrote it up the way you can say a thing without saying it. Beachlit call box, audible ring, inspected, line dead label intact, handset secured, no contact. It looks like nothing. That's the trick of paper. I called utilities anyway and got a man who graduated high school with my brother. He laughed the friendly laugh you use before you tell someone they're an idiot. "Those boxes are cold," he said. "Ain't a wick of copper to them." He said wick like lamp, and the word went into my ear and stuck. I can't ring what ain't got a feed. You heard a frog. I went back daylight with my key. The spider had moved 3 inches and eaten something. The inside of the box was the inside of boxes everywhere. Dust, a plastic glove wrinkled in on itself, a screw that never found a home, the faintest bloom of rust where rain had argued its way in years ago. The handset cradle clicked like a metronome when I irritated it. No line, no tone, no tone. I stood there too long with the door open and felt foolish in front of a piece of metal. A week later, there was a dirt slump at the little maintenance pull-off past Cold Spring. Not a landslide, not a tragedy. The kind of slough that takes the topsoil into the culverts and leaves the surface looking like nothing happened until you put weight on it. I walked it with a shovel handle and the ground sounded hollow, a false floor you could put a foot through and meet the rest of your night the wrong way. We closed the gate for good. I wrote a washout risk. Do not use on a piece of aluminum sign blank with a paint pen that stank like lemon and old glue. It felt like closing a library book I hadn't checked out. The part that keeps a grip is smaller than the ring or the gate or the slump. It's that sentence. I didn't say it again for a long time. I didn't want to put my mouth on the same shape and find out it fit me. Then fall came and I was training a seasonal on night rotation. Kid with a good head and the kind of recklessness you can still sand off. We came up on an unmarked cut someone had been using to park for sunset photos and I felt the lecture rise. What came out of my mouth was, if it isn't on your map, it isn't for you. The kid nodded like I was wise. I heard the words sit in the cab like a live thing. I drove 10 miles in silence, trying to make my tongue believe it hadn't done what it had. After that, it showed up more. Little places. Teaching the junior high when we do their visitation day, and a boy wanted to know if it was okay to step past the low chain at the gorge overlook just for a second. Oh, Grittin. Telling my daughter, who wanted to take the logging road behind the campground in the snow because somebody's Instagram made it look like a fairy tale, I'd hear myself say it and feel that click. A phone going back into its cradle like a circuit making up its mind to complete. I went back to Beach Lick one night when fog made a hallway out of every stretch of road. I parked without calling it in. The Blue Dome hummed sweetly to itself, bug drawn to bug heaven. I thought about picking up the handset and saying it into the line, feeding it backward in case that's what the world had asked of me then, and I'd been too slow to hear. If it isn't on your map, it isn't for you. I put my hand on the plastic and I didn't lift it. I stood there listening to a thing that did not ring and a night that did not care. I told the air, which is sometimes the same as telling yourself, I'm not here to be a switchboard. I went back to the truck and drove. My brain will still give me the good, boring answers when I need to sleep. Flaggedly need to sleep. Induction. Voltage bleed. Someone playing. Old bells singing when the air pressure is just so when fog makes a drum out of box metal when your ears go hunting. I like those answers. They keep me kind. The other version, the one I don't say, is that the parkway is a long stitch through hills that remember before us and will remember after. And sometimes the stitch is also a wire, and sometimes something uses it to put a thought in your head you'd like to think you made. I'm not dramatizing when I tell you the sound of a telephone bell. The old kind makes my shoulders try to climb out of my shirt now. I turned my cell's ring to a stupid whistle so I won't have to move right back into that fog with a blue light painting me like a fish. When I pass Beach Lick and the box sits in its pool of aquarium blue, I don't look right at it. If I have a trainee, I make them say the map thing like it's our rule. I don't tell them where I got it. They'll decide for themselves who has the right to talk on a deadline. I have my maps. I carry paper. I use my hands to fold and refold the corners until they stay down. I make my peace with the idea that some turnouts aren't for me, and maybe they never were, and maybe the only decent way to say that to a person is in a voice that sounds enough like their own that they'll listen. They spread the waste out for years back when the tipple was busy, red dog slag that looks like rust ground to sugar, iron and cinders and clinker from coal that burned too hot too long. Around here, it's cheaper than gravel if you don't care about your shocks. Folks dump it down long dirt spines, pack it with a dozer, and call it a road. Under headlights, red dog glows like it keeps a small ember for itself. It crunches when you drive it, a dry, glassy squeal you can feel in your molars, and the dust from it gets into your hairline and the cuffs of your pants and the crease where your neck meets your shoulder. I swear you can taste iron by the time you hit the next turn. I work to know. 6 seemed long enough for my back to teach me new math. You count days by what you lift and what you regret. After the roof talk we had the year the timbers cried and 2 boys didn't come home, I took a courier job. Nights mostly, parts and small pumps for gas wells and creekside outfits, nothing heavy enough to make me see stars if I forget to lift right. It keeps my hands busy and my head quieter than a couch would, and it lets me run the back roads when they belong to crickets. Red Dog Road wasn't my first choice, ever. It runs from the mouth of the old prep plant to a line of trailers and a gate into timber company land, and it's a belly full of cinders. But the fastest way to the pad I needed that night, Gate 12, a compressor shed where men sleep in campers and pretend they don't, was up that road, and I was already an hour behind because the pump I was picking up had been rebuilt wrong, and the guy with the hairnet tattoos took a smoke break instead of a wrench brake. My truck is a 1 Silverado, bench seat with a spring that knows right where my hip sits, cab smells like coffee, and the sweet rot of those orange hand wipes every shop stocks. The headliner droops like an old face. The defroster works only when it's not cold and the heater's stuck on 1 speed that hums like an aquarium. The radio keeps trying to save me with old songs, but mostly it just feeds me static like a punishment I earned. I keep a thermos and a toe of jerky in the glove box. Stray dogs around dump sites don't take offense if you throw meat before you go. On Red Dog Road, my windows stay up even in August. Red dust can turn a man into a brick statue if he lets it. People have stories about that road, the kind that attach to waste and fire. Slaghounds, some call them, and even saying the words makes me feel like a half-wit. Coyotes cross anywhere they can. You get feral dogs up there too, ones that stop choosing a yard and let the hills choose for them. I've seen them broad-chested and hungry-eyed, shy as ghosts until meat appears, then all ribs and opinions. That's as much magic as I ever believed in. Mouths and heat, and what a body needs when nobody else has to feed it. Still, there's a thing people say about Red Dog usually after a third beer and a lighter held under their own chin. The pack that runs the ditch line and doesn't make a noise. Too many paws. No breath. I didn't carry that in my head like truth. I carried it like trash that blows into the bed of your truck and rides with you because you don't stop long enough to shove it out. It was just past 2 when I left the pavement, and the road turned from gray to rust under my beam. The night had scrubbed itself with a little shower and then changed its mind. The red held the wet in a thin skin. The ditch water was stained that tea color you get where iron weeps and the weeds along it. Pokeweed and doggerel and that rough grass that cuts if you run your hand wrong, leaned like they'd slept in the rain and woke up with a grudge. I rolled slow because speed and cinders don't get along. The first half mile is flats and a run past a tangle of old conveyor belts no one bothered to haul, then 2 lazy curves and a narrow bridge where the handrail reads more like intention than steel. You feel Red Dog under your tires in a way you don't feel gravel. Gravel jumps up and tells you what it is. Red Dog slides like it's smarter than you. It squeals and hums and sometimes sings in a thin voice if your tread finds the right seam. And when the dust lifts, it rises like smoke without heat, lays a film so fine that one pass of a dry glove leaves a red ghost of your hand on anything you touch. I could taste it in the back of my throat before the first curve ended. I took a drink of coffee to put a lid on it, and that made iron of my tongue. I'd told myself I'd avoid the story power this time. No listening for anything in the weeds, no looking for men I used to run with in the backs of my eyes, no letting the past climb in the cab. I had a drop to make and a ridge to get over, and I didn't need company from either world. The road didn't care what I needed. The first sign that something had other plans was not a sound. It was the absence of the one I expected. The crunch went thin. The hum of cinders under rubber pulled away like the sea does from a beach you thought was safe. For a quarter mile, the road under me was Red Dog, and not like somebody had put felt down under my tires, but that's later. That's when I started noticing. At the beginning, I rolled with my hands soft and told the radio to hush and tried not to be a man who listens for tiny changes because he has been in rooms where tiny changes mattered. The ditch along Red Dog sits lower than you think, cut deeper than it needs to be because no one bothered to haul proper fill. On dry days, it's a run of brick dust and broken glass. On wet nights, it pulls a slow tee to the culverts, a rip you can step over if you know where the bank is firm and turn your ankle if you don't. I hit the first lazy curve and the weeds in the ditch moved like a hand, ran just under them. No wind where I sat. The tops of the trees didn't shiver, nothing ticked my door mirror, but down along the ditch line the stems lay and rose in a traveling wave. I told myself it was water. Water has the right to move. Water comes with its own ideas. But the wave kept pace with me exactly. At 30 it was 30, at 28 it went 28, and when I eased the truck to the crown and gave the ditch more lane, the wave stayed the same distance off my passenger tire, like a separate road running mine. The sound made no sense. Red Dog brags when you step on it. It brags under dog paws, same as tires. Coyotes scratch ferals pad with a scuff and a clatter when their nails grow long. What ran that ditch ran without noise. No drumming, no clatter, no breath hunting hot at the edge of my window. I cut the fan to listen better, and my own quiet became a problem because my heart graduated to my ears and stood there, arms crossed. The wave in the weeds split around culvert mouths where the ditch dropped under an old driveway, then joined itself again the second it cleared, like one thing with many feet. I did not hit the lock button. I mention that because it felt like deciding not to spit in a church. Nudge. On the second curve, the one where people dump sofas because the trees hide your shame from the road, I saw a shape low and quick in the corner of my eye. Not dog color, not coyote, grizzled, not fox warm, dark like cinders, like fresh spilled coal, like a wet shadow. Bodies, I want to say, but bodies implies one. This was several that knew they were together. The hindquarters were wrong for dogs and right for anything that runs low and is built to pour around obstacles. Tail or no tail. Put a hand to my throat and I couldn't tell you. Ears, not pointed fox ears. Not floppy pet ears. If you make a fist and lay it in the ditch and roll it, that's the movement they had. I kept my eyes on the lane because looking makes things think you're speaking to them. I am old enough to know that. I tried a trick. I tapped the brake, a polite little flare of red. Wave slowed. I gave gas, thinking if they were animals, I'd outpace them without hurting anyone. They matched. There's a speed where tires on red dogs sing, not a whine, more a string under a bow. And I rode that pitch like it could carry me across some wrongness. The pack stayed in periphery like it knew it would be rude to come into the center of my attention. I'm embarrassed to say I talked to it. I see you, I said, because I could not think of a useful lie. Stay down there. Keep to your side. Down there. The ditch wave kept pace until the last culvert before the mouth, then bled off like a thing that knew its territory and didn't feel the need to follow past it. On asphalt, the truck changed tone in the way they do, tires humming something made for them, suspension giving a little sigh for having been forgiven. I didn't look in the mirror because mirrors at night have their own ideas. My breath did the stupid shallow thing it does when my back flares. In, hold, a sip of out, another in. The hand on the hood, seen through the glare, kept its dignity, a faintness under the slope of the windshield. I ran the outside wipers to see if the streak would smear under rain that wasn't falling. It didn't. The mark stayed until I got home and put real water to it, and then it faded the way a bruise does. Presence, less ghost. At the sink in my trailer, I scrubbed my palms with dish soap and then with a gritty hand cleaner that smells like oranges and regret. Red bled into the water and went away, but a thin iron tang stayed in my mouth like I'd put a nail on my tongue. I slept in the stubborn way you do when you haven't told your body the truth. I lay on my back and watched a patch of streetlight write slow letters on the ceiling, and every time a car hissed past on the main road, I felt my calves want to flex like my feet had kept pace with something in a ditch. I woke just before the dawn when birds start to remember the day and the light starts to remember its job, and I went out with a bucket and a hose. The handprint took water slow like it had become part of the paint. It didn't run. It relaxed. By noon, it was gone unless you knew where to tilt your head. I told 2 people because I am still built for other men's opinions even when I pretend I'm not. Big Arlen, who runs the parts counter on day shift and who used to hunt everything that moved. He said ferals, easy, moving on quiet dirt in a ditch that had been packed by county trucks, and my head enjoyed that for a minute. Dogs get smart, he said. They learn where not to put their feet. They go silent when they're hungry enough. He said it with a kind of admiration that made me want to imagine there was meat in the story and not something else. Tyler, who lies for sport, told me about slaghounds like he was the one who named them. Said they didn't pant like real dogs because they'd been born in heat with no air. Said they run alongside anything that makes a machine sound because it means air is moving through a place it shouldn't. I told him to knock it off and he grinned like he'd gotten what he came for. Days later, I noticed faint arcs of red inside my windshield, way down by the dash where the glass curves. Not hand, not anything so generous. Just the suggestion of half moons like nails had touched the glass light from inside. Static pulls dust where it wants it. I know that. The defroster kicks warm air with a smell like mouse, and red dog finds can come in through the cowl and lay down where they please. I know that too. I wiped with a clean rag and the arcs went away and left that faint smear the sunshine shows, the kind that makes you think you don't clean right no matter how long you scrub. I haven't taken red dog at night since, unless I had to. When I did, once in early fall, the weeds in the ditch were dead, brown skeletons that shouldn't move much, and they moved a little anyway. The road hummed its thin string at 35 like a throat clearing. I put jerky on the passenger seat and felt stupid for thinking meat was a thing I could trade for anything but bad breath. At the bridge, the dust came soft again, a lazy lifting like something that had expected me and wasn't going to make a fuss about welcome. The windshield stayed clean. I didn't breathe through my mouth, which is a child's solution and also sometimes the only one that works. Every once in a while, I'll get red dust inside the house, a thumbprint on the bathroom mirror that comes from nowhere that makes sense. I blame my own shirt. I blame the way dirt carries itself. I blame the way the trailers around here breathe when the furnace cuts on and sucks whatever's on the floorboards up into the air for a taste. I wipe it and say nothing to anybody because I am not going to be a man who turns dust into a sermon. Still, I keep noticing 5 knocks and ordinary noises. A loose vent cover rattles and my head counts in 5s before I stop it. A branch against the siding finds a rhythm that isn't random, and I have to turn the radio on to drown it. I can give you all the grown-up reasons. Dust rides vortices. Red Dog's fines are small as flour and wicked as dye. Static sets up on glass and pulls anything light toward it. Dogs run where tires don't, so they don't get their pads cut. Coyotes learn roads by scent like we learn them by light. I have said these aloud to put a roof on the part of me that wants to hear a different story. The other story isn't something I know how to shape with a mouth that has to buy milk and pay rent. It's just an idea that the waste we make out of fire keeps its own accounting. That something born of heat and lack will move without sound because sound is a luxury of breath, and breath is for the lucky. That some nights the red lifts inside the cab to show you your hand in the place a hand shouldn't be, and you will put your own next to it like a child and hope the sizes don't match. If you run Red Dog after midnight, go light on the brake in the curves and don't try to outpace what wants to keep you company. Keep to the crown. Keep your windows up. Don't bargain with food. If weeds lay and rise with you, pretend you don't notice and say something dumb like weather to the quiet. When the dust paints your glass from the inside, wipe it when you get home in daylight and don't go looking for it in every window. I am still the man I was before it. Back on tight if I lift wrong, hands good at bolts and boxes, and the small courtesies of night work. I just keep a rag tucked down by the seat now, and when I smell iron in my mouth without putting metal there, I know to watch the ditch line, and I keep my speed where the road stops singing and I can hear my own breath count and not somebody else's. Widow's Bridge is a 1-lane iron truss across a river that refuses to be quiet. You yield at either end and your headlights paint the lattice with white X's that seem to move even when your wheels stop. The posted weight is a lie everybody lives with. The rivets are original. The deck is timber under old steel grate in patches that were a compromise, and the whole span ticks and hums like an old stove cooling after supper. We call it Widows because somewhere back, a story took root about a woman who walked out when the piers were new and waited for an answer that never crossed. But if you ask the men who keep the county's bridges, they'll tell you the name fits because it takes its time. It asks you too. You don't go barreling over iron. You creep and listen to what's bearing you. I drive nights for the funeral home. Not just hearses, vans too, and a tired Suburban that's done more hospital loops than ambulance crews admit. But the coach is my usual, a black Cadillac retrofitted with rollers and velvet curtains that turn highway sodium into church light. It smells like lemon oil and the faint formaldehyde of a prep room that lives in everything, no matter how tight the lids go. The rear deck has those little ball rollers that click when you touch them with a finger. There's a strap with a buckle that finds your shin if you forget it. The front cabin is quiet in a way most cars aren't, like it knows how to keep company. Sometimes when the coach is occupied, I talk in the general direction of the curtain as if small talk can teach the road good manners. Empty, I don't say much. An empty coach makes sound new spaces to live in. That night was empty. We'd made a late transfer out of county and handed a gentleman over to a daughter who had stopped crying, which is worse than crying in my book. I rolled the gurney back onto the deck, locked the rollers, snapped straps, shut the rear door with the gentle two-handed push that avoids the slam. The clock said 12:46. The river road was the fastest way home. The long state highway would have meant another 40 minutes with nothing to show for it but talk radio static and the sugar crash of a gas station donut. I took the turn for Widows because it was habit and because habit is a warm coat. The air had that scarf cold that sits low along water. Rain had gone through earlier and left the world combed backward. Leaves clung darkly to their own shadows. The coach's heater fan whispered at my ankles. I left the radio off. You learn, driving at that hour, what your own machines sound like when they have your full attention. The coach had that faint plastic creak at the right pillar, the one my boss swears he can't hear. The curtains shivered a little with the movement of my breathing through the vents. The rear roller track was quiet, the way it's supposed to be, no cargo to ride on it. At the bridge approach, the road narrows and the iron takes a first breath for you. A low moan where the truss catches your sound and turns it back. The yield sign is bent the way signs get bent when the county mower thinks it's winning a chess game. Oncoming was nothing, just my washed-out face in the black bars. I dipped my high beams out of respect for a span that can blind you with your own light. The river below threw up its wet iron smell, and the iron above returned it, and you get a sandwich of metal where your head is the meat. I eased the coach's nose onto the timber. The first expansion gap clicked under my front right tire like a metronome counting a song I didn't know yet. Tick. The whole span answered with a thermal sound like cooling engine blocks, small, reasonable, unthreatening. Old iron shares its complaints. The truss to my left, close enough to touch if I were the kind of fool who proves proximity, wore decades of chipping paint and the names of children who lit a Sharpie and thought that made them immortal. My hands went lighter on the wheel. My shoulders let down a half-inch. It was ordinary this part. The bridge made its regular noises. The river did river work. My breath fogged the edge of the windshield glass, and my sleeve squeaked when I wiped it away with the back of my hand. Then just past the first third, where the lattice looks the same as it does everywhere else and doesn't, the bridge felt like it had shifted gear. The deck hum ran deeper, a note lower in bone. The irons ticking found a patience I recognized from hospital hallways at 3 a.m. The kind of rhythm that says there is time for what's coming, and you will not rush it. The span took my speed and set it aside like a coat at the door. I put the coach down another mile per hour without meaning to, and the clock on the dash went from 12:49 to 12:49 without moving at all. The first footfall, the word came to me before the sound, landed on the roof above the rear curtain. Not on the deck, not on the iron, not outside where I could blame truss or rain. The roof skin of the coach is thin enough that hail speaks in beads. This was not that. It was a soft weight set down, not heavy enough to dent, specific enough to map, a heel, then the rest of the foot. No scrape, no drag. A step. I watched the rear curtain in the mirror because I couldn't help it, and it quivered like a person breathing under a blanket. My first thought was a raccoon, and my mouth made the shape of hiss, but raccoons scrape and hustle and knock. This did not hustle. It knew where to put itself. I held my breath. The next step waited. It waited a full count matching my selfish hold, then stepped when my chest gave up and let air in again. The step landed forward of the first, deliberate, weight-laid heel to toe with the kind of caution that is not fear but consideration. Tick from the joint under my tire, a big boing from somewhere in the truss as a diagonal took load, and over that, the soft thump of something walking my roof to my breath. The coach's roller deck clinked once behind me like a marble tapping glass and then held still, as if an empty surface had decided it wasn't. A thermal, I said out loud to hear myself be silly. Expansion. I tried breathing with the reckless pattern of someone who doesn't think about it. A big inhale timed wrong, a held-out exhale that made my head float a little, a stutter in the middle, just to be perverse. The steps matched, not perfect but close, stepped in the trough of my exhale, paused in the false holds, took two small ones when I cheated a breath. It didn't rush to keep up when I fooled it. It did not need to rush. Halfway across, the bridge insists on a slower run. Low run. I gave it what it wanted, to respect the skiddery boards under the grates, the slight crown that becomes a gray river in frost. As the coach slowed, the footsteps took confidence, or maybe I noticed more of them when I wasn't defending my speed. They came forward along the roof toward the driver's seat and stopped when they found the line where the headliner meets the windshield. The roof above me bowed faintly, the way sheet metal does when a cat finds the warm spot at the hood seam. The rear curtain lifted in a shallow rhythm that didn't belong to the fan. It felt, if a curtain can feel like anything, like the motion of someone's dress as they walk a narrow aisle and don't want to brush anything they shouldn't. I didn't look up. You don't stare at a thing that's keeping its manners. I looked right at the truss leg nearest my window, rust blisters making constellations. In the corner of my eye, rainwater beads on the roofline trembled in a line and rolled precisely when my lungs did. My breath became ungenerous. I tried making it small, mean little sips, thinking I could starve the pattern and make the steps choose something else to ride. They waited. It wasn't hostage to me. It would take what I offered. The dash clock said 12:49, as if a second had never been invented, and the river turned itself under me with that long, wordless curl a big body makes when it remembers the ocean. At the three-quarter mark, there's a peeled-out patch of deck where a dump bed kissed iron last winter and lied about it. I waited for the step to falter there, to betray itself as loose trim, a strap, something rational I could secure. The roof spoke exactly where it had been speaking, the weight light but not absent. The hearse's visor rattled the way it always does when you drive over anything larger than salt, and then stopped, embarrassed almost, like it had interrupted. Ma'am, I said, which is not bravery and not fear. It's habit when the person you're with calls for respect and you don't understand the arrangement yet. My voice sounded wrong inside the coach, like it had put its hat back on too soon after a service. The steps above my head answered with something that wasn't sound, more the sense of a head turning toward a person who has finally remembered how to be polite. Then a final careful set down where the roof meets the windshield, light blooming across the glass from my own headlights that caught and spread in the thin film of river, missed the way, breath